I side with this fellow who says, well, you know, the guy who's wrong should be drug out in the street here. And what I'm saying is, all right, so if you're wrong, drag yourself out in the street and shoot yourself. But I'm saying this to Ellen Hodgson Brown as well. You know, I asked her, you know, if she was willing to stake the fate of humanity on the veritability of her purported solution. And she disappeared from the forum without another remark, without ever answering. And I have a huge problem with that. Not only because I have worked so long, not just to prove I'm right, but to do it tens of thousands of times over, to write software, to test the idea. I've done the math like no one on the planet has even conceived of doing. But a woman called me a few years ago, and you know, and she was losing her home, and I know this person remotely, good lady, and you know, when she found out about what I do, she took the most diligent interest in it immediately and mastered it for herself. And before you know it, I mean, she had several members of her family and friends who actually have immediate family who are members of the Obama administration. She's got several propositions of mathematically perfected economy into the Obama administration just on her own volition and her own initiative. But she called me a couple years ago to talk to me about things, and in the process of our discussion, she informed me, and I don't know that this is a fact, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. She informed me, she asked me, did I know that there are 125,000 children under the age of 12 roaming the streets of Los Angeles homeless. Well, no, I did not know this. But my problem is, well, airheads like Ellen Hodgson Brown are casually musing and being cute about a possible solution here or a possible solution here, or saying, in my model, and they haven't even created a model, and they haven't even followed it all out and tested it even in their own minds, much less modeled it. And they put up a site for a wiki site for input from other people wanting to compromise solution into something that's agreeable to all. I have a huge problem with that. When, you know, however many 12-year-old girls are going to be raped tonight in Los Angeles because they don't even have a proper home, you know, or protection from whatever, you know, might happen to them. And, you know, I don't think that any responsible person, and I mean even remotely responsible person, could possibly take these things so lightly as to advocate something is a solution which they can't even articulate at least some facsimile of a proof which would demonstrate, in fact, that it is wholly accountable for even just the issues that it has to address. Never mind getting it right, but at least to do that much work. To pretend that you have a solution on anything less, I'm sorry, but it's unforgivable.
Yeah. Well, I have to agree with you on that one, Mike. Obviously, you've put forward plenty of evidence. I've read, Ellen's book and a few other of the publications that she puts out. I haven't really done anything with Steven Zarlinger, but I have seen the other movies as well that you refer to, the Bill Still movies, and I forget the actual Paul Grogan, is it, that does the Money is Debt. And I mean, I have to agree, they talk a lot about the history and a lot about the problem, but I don't see anywhere that there's any solution, other than on some circumstances or some parts of it they talk about interest, but they don't really go into any great detail either. So, and you do, of course. So that's where I'm going to be focusing my attention, because if somebody's got a plan and they've got a solution, then if it can be backed up with the mathematics as well, and questions answered, then that should be the way we should look. And nothing's ever perfect, but we have to assume that it's as close to being perfect as we can possibly make it under the current circumstances.
Well, on that one point, I only like to point out that no, mathematically perfected economy is perfect, and that is, what people whose disciplines aren't so challenging that they are required to resolve so many factoids into a solution don't understand is that scope is the whole issue there. That is, the father of solution understands the scope to which I refer to when I say mathematically perfected economy. Many years ago, early 70s, I had to come up with a name for this. People say you have to use a name for this because instead of using a name, I would redefine it. I would restate it. And, of course, that's quite verbose in the case of something such as this. But the fact of the matter is, okay, I had to come up with a name. So what was the process? I mathematically perfected economy. What is the end result? A mathematically perfected economy. Sounds audacious. It did back then. But then, again, what is this but simple accounting? Where does it go awry? A couple of places. Pretending to be a creditor, laundering principal into your possession, and charging interest for it when the only actual risk property is the negligible costs of publication. As if that justified interest. The actual rate of interest applied to the risk of the cost of publication is an incredible rate of interest if you ever do the math on that. So the thing is that as a father of something such as this, you have tread down every path to the point that it is a well-worn trail, and you realize where you get to on the point of the trail, where, owing to political controversy, personal imperfections, the imperfections of a populace, where people would deviate from this. But what the perfection of it is the principles to follow, and that is eradication of interest and an obligatory schedule of payment at the rate of consumption or depreciation, which are understood to be different expressions for what is to be understood to be the same thing. That is, the rate of consumption or depreciation are to be understood to be alternate expressions for the same thing. A thing which retires circulation so that the remaining circulation is equal to the remaining value of represented property. And that in itself is perfect. And that's where I draw the line in the scope. There is such a thing as mathematically perfected economy. There's nothing imperfect about that at all. And that's the principle. That's the guideline. Now when the people say, oh, but I'm going to take very good care of my, my 1979 Chevelle. It's going to last for 40 years. I want it depreciated over 40 years. And another guy says, I'm going to race mine around the neighborhood and I'm going to crash it into the first tree I feel like running into, maybe even sooner. All right, we'll depreciate yours over 6 days. These are not imperfections of mathematically perfected economy. This is our immediate tendency to deviate from it. What are we doing with this prescription for depreciation and consumption that we have to pay at? All we're doing is determining a general pattern which does not have to be perfect at all, so that it accomplishes a relatively perfect effect, which is so many times more fit and more capable of sustaining prosperity that it's phenomenal. Immediately we may prosper 12 times as much for a conversion to mathematically perfected economy without even starting to, embarking on the potential renaissance which could ensue. The thing isn't that it's imperfect because of the ways that we wrestle over implementing it. Those are things that we do, and our guideline toward perfection always has to be the principle that indeed what we want to do is to depreciate the property at a rate of consumption which reflects the remaining value of it. That's really the only necessary principle that we implement. And yeah, we're going to get that wrong. One country is going to decide, well, we got it wrong, so we'll put some Band-Aids on it. We'll do an Ellen Hodgson Brown thing. We'll, stab some knives in the cut, and then we'll cover up the bleeding, and then it's all good, And that's us. That's us deviating from the principle. What a mature self-governed society would do would say, okay, look, all right, this is how long that should last. Let's take this de-escalated rate of depreciation, the default one. It works perfectly fine for virtually everything we do. Let's just accurately determine classes of lifespans, fit things in like that, and let's do something else. Let's make a person not pay necessarily, but have so much reserve payments, which would also help us to protect ourselves from non-payment. Well, another person would raise their hand and say, no, wait a minute, okay? Under mathematically perfected economy, the remaining value of the represented property is always sufficient to recoup non-payment. Therefore, there isn't any risk. I said, well, that isn't what we want to have happen, and there might be court costs, they might vandalize the property. Let's do something else. Well, the thing is, there's ways of taking care of all these issues which we introduce to the equation for absolutely needless behavior, which is counterproductive, if not destructive to ourselves. And yeah, we can account for these different ways, and each one of them can be effective, but that's not economy. That's enforcing the obligations upon ourselves. And that's why I'm distinguishing between the two. Yeah, there is such a thing as mathematically perfect